So hello everyone, thanks for joining me on this webinar today on how to leverage LinkedIn and navigate the pharmacist job market. My name is David from the Pharmacy Informatics Academy, where we train the next generation of pharmacists. I'm also an engineer for a health technology company that focuses on medication intelligence. So even though my focus is on technology, this webinar is geared towards general pharmacy, entry-level industry, and utilizing LinkedIn as someone in pharmacy. So I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Lindsey Summers. And Lindsey, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invitation, David. So great to meet you and see everyone else that has joined us this evening. I work for a recruiting firm. I've been recruiting in this space for about 13 years. It includes lots of clinicians as well as pharmacists. I get many questions about how to make the transition from retail to industry or just to another skill set. And happy to join you all this evening.
Great. So Lindsey has years of experience in recruiting, and not only pharmacists, but many other professionals as well in a wide range of industry roles. She has a wealth of specialized knowledge in pharmacy industry recruitment, as well as recommendations for general pharmacy recruitment. So that is a little bit about us. And as we progress through the webinar, I would like everyone to take note between 1 to 2 takeaways that you get from this webinar. Either write them down or have them in your head. And I'll explain to you what we're going to do with them at the very end, especially if you're interested in increasing your digital presence. So make sure to follow us at the very end. And next, I wanted to dive deeper in terms of why we're creating this webinar in the first place. So I get tons and tons of questions about how to break into a new field. I was in the same place as many of you are. After graduating pharmacy school, I applied to many jobs online, cold, and I wasn't getting a lot of the job bites that I wanted. And I was getting the classic, "Thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, we decided not to move forward with your application," which was discouraging to say the least. And it's not until you realize that more than 70% of applications that go through an applicant tracking system are going to be automatically rejected. So it wasn't until I really flipped my strategy and focused on developing warm connections, which served to be much more fruitful. So that's my why. So I want to get people from point A to point B to fulfilling careers. So that's my why. Lindsey, if you want to tell us a little bit about yours.
Absolutely. So in what I do for a living, I absolutely love to recruit. Could never imagine recruiting in any other space except for this. I can tell you that I get many questions, just as David does, about really, is networking big? Why should I have a network? Why should I leverage my network? What can I do to transition? What am I doing wrong? And these sorts of things. And so I'm happy to have joined this evening because now we get to discuss live really what some of those strategies are. So that's my why.
So thank you, Lindsey. And so we really came together to help as many people as much as possible, really getting the pharmacy recruitment perspective where it isn't really seen anywhere else. And so thus we wanted to break as many misconceptions as much as possible and provide greater clarity on navigating the pharmacist job market. And so for everyone that registered, we got hundreds of questions that was submitted to us. So thank you everyone for sending that over. Unfortunately, we're not able to have the time to address every single one of these questions, but I wanted to tackle as many questions as much as possible. So this webinar is broken down to general pharmacy questions, then entry-level industry questions, then social media questions. And lastly, we'll do a live Q&A in the few minutes that we have at the end of the webinar. So if there's a Q&A portion, if you want to open that up and ask any questions that you like, then we'll try to address some of them at the very end. So let's definitely get started. So Lindsey, the first question that I have for you is, how valuable is a network how We always get the question of, you always have to network. Networking is very valuable. So how is it valuable?
Absolutely. So it's a really great question, right? And it's the title of this webinar this evening, right? How valuable is a network? So it's huge, but you need to look at the value of your network as more than just, okay, I'm looking for a job right now today. What can these people do for me that I'm reaching out to right now today, right? Say it's been 20 years, you've been in retail pharmacy, you're burnt out, you want to do something different. I guarantee you those folks that you worked with in those last 20 years, maybe even some of your professors from pharmacy school, maybe some of the people that you worked with over the years, they're willing to help you. But if you've lost that network, if you haven't talked to someone in 10 years, they're going to be less apt to reply to you. So really, your network is incredibly important. Even if you look at the type of work that I do, some of the people that I was working with 10 years ago, they were directors then. They're now VPs and heads of. You know, you want to be memorable to people. You want to be able to reach out to them. You want them, when they reach to you, you want to be able to help them. And maybe it's just something, say, hey, Amit, you know, we worked together 10 years ago at CVS. I don't know if you'll remember me. I see you made the transition into ABC role. Would love to meet with you, grab you a cup of coffee, and maybe sit down and pick your brain for half an hour. Would really appreciate that time. And if there's anything that I can do in return for you, would be happy to offer that up. And so certainly when you network, yes, do you want to network with recruiters trusting, you know? Yes, of course. But you want to reach out to your peers, your colleagues, your coworkers, your professors, your friends, your neighbors, your parents' friends, your parents' neighbors, right? You know, your cousin's sister's cousin, you know? All of those people are part of your network. So, you know, most people do not get their job through the job they applied to. Most people do not get their job through a recruiter. Might be kind of shooting myself in the foot with this one. They don't. They get it through people they're proven with. They get it through people that they know. So I'm hoping that that's a bit helpful, and that's what folks are looking for.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so to summarize, it's really not what you know, it is really who you know nowadays, especially in the pharmacy world. And you definitely make a lot of good points in terms of, you know, the closest thing that you're going to have is your immediate network, your pharmacist, your professors, your mentors, your even mentees, friends, colleagues you might be able to get in touch with just to see and realize that, you know, the networking is a two-sided conversation, where you're not just asking, hey, I have a question and I'm just only interested in getting information out of you. These are relationships that you're trying to build between one another, so you could develop that trust. You're developing that friendship and be able to communicate that very well. So, but that makes a lot of good points over there. So the next question that I had for you, Lindsey, was, you know, nowadays it's a trying time, so especially with COVID-19. So what's the best way to navigate the job search during this COVID-19 crisis, especially when a lot of companies and healthcare institutions are on a hiring freeze? So how would you best go about trying to tackle that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. And clearly it's something that's affecting us, not only here in the US, but I think I saw somebody put in something, hello from Egypt, earlier in the chat, right? It really is, COVID has impacted folks really not just here, not just in North America, but really globally, right? And so the good news is we're all in it together, and the bad news is we're all in it together, right? And so I think that the very first approach that you take when you're out there amid, you know, COVID-19 is, you know, when you're sending these notes, particularly to people that you don't know, you really want to be empathetic, right? You know, I always appreciate it when folks send a note to me, me and say something like, you know, hope all is well with this crisis, you know, as best as you're handling it, wanted to network with you for ABCD, you know, and they sign it, best regards, or be well, or stay safe, or whatever it might be. And so I think the first piece of that is to realize who your audience is. It doesn't matter if it's a hiring manager, an internal recruiter, external recruiter, your colleague, your peer, somebody you know, someone you don't know. That's the first step, right? We're all going through it. We're all human. We all know someone that's been impacted by this. But I think the other pieces is that you need to do your research and ensure that, you know, ensure the people that you're reaching to are actually the folks that are, you know, your audience, your hiring manager. In many cases in these job descriptions, right, you apply online, okay, well, 100 other people, and I'm not kidding you, are applying to that exact same job with these quick one replies. And so you need to find out a way to really come to the top of that pile, right? When you look at these job descriptions, it's going to say, all right, reports to the director of pharmacy, right? So you're going to go find the director of pharmacy at ABC company, and you're going to approach that person, right? You're probably not going to be approaching someone that isn't closely related to that individual. And so it's really being targeted, being patient with those replies. I can tell you, for not just me, but hiring managers, probably David, even someone like you get lots of questions. You try and be responsive, but at the end of the day, you have to triage. If you're getting 20 and 30 questions a day on something, the person that is the most approachable and the most knowledgeable, that person is going to get the reply first. And so that's just the honest truth, that you'll want to try and be empathetic, be targeted, you're reaching to the right people, make sure you're qualified or close, very close to qualified at what you're applying for, and be patient, right? You know, don't send 4 messages in a week to the same person. You know, say, any reply? Have you heard anything? Right? You need to be very polished in that approach. So COVID-19 or not, you know, those are really the extra steps you need to go above and beyond to ensure the best initial response.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I really like that that answer. One of my personal tips that I give people is, especially when you apply online, even though it is applying cold, some LinkedIn jobs particularly might have the hiring manager that's associated with it. So it doesn't hurt just to say, after you applied, you could email that hiring manager and say, hey, look, my name is David Vu. I applied to X, Y, and Z position. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions, just to kind of develop a little bit of relationship that you have with the hiring manager, to be a little bit more personal, because the goal is to be able to get your name out to someone and talk to them really face to face. So as opposed to going through a computerized system and just getting rejected each time. So that's a great answer to that question. And I have a lot of questions in Q&A about if this webinar is going to be recorded, and it will be recorded. So I'll look out for that later on. So hopefully that addresses a lot of the questions that I'm getting. So the next question that I have for you, Lindsey, is trying to transition over to entry-level industry. And so we have a lot of folks in retail pharmacy, so especially in this audience. So how do I find an entry-level industry job? And would I actually be still considered entry-level, even though I might have years of experience in another space? So in this case, how might a retail pharmacist try to transition over into the industry space?
Yes, yes, yes. So this is a loaded question, right? And it's something that is very understandable, right? We see a lot of people wanting to make transition, particularly that are clinicians, PharmDs, MDs, nurse practitioners, whoever they might be, right? They get burnt out with the retail pharmacy space, or they get burnt out with patient care, right? Reimbursement is a big issue these days in the clinical worlds and things like that. And so are you considered entry level? So sort of, yes. So you need to really take a hard look at what you're willing to flex with and what you're not willing to flex with. I think I just saw a question pop up about some of these super saturated areas. So let's say you're a retail pharmacist in Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, right? Some of these areas are highly concentrated with pharma and biotech companies. And so along with that is going to come people with years and years of industry experience. The ways that you can, get considered easily or easier in the retail space, take a look at either what you did in pharmacy school, what you're passionate about currently, the types of patients you treat. A good way to get considered on the industry side is if you're purely retail, is try and transition into a clinical inpatient pharmacy role. That is one good way. Say you live in a city with a high concentration of whatever it is, XYZ, that you're filling prescriptions for. Maybe it's the anti-infective space. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe you work directly next to a company or a hospital that treats a lot of cancer patients, right? You really want to try and piggyback off of what your strengths are. And you don't need to necessarily include anything and everything you've ever done, but what you want to do is at the top of your resume, add an objective statement of what you're trying to do, 4 or 5 bullet points about how your experience applies. And what we don't want to hear is you're a quick learner, right? It's kind of empty. Everyone can claim they're a quick learner. Try and put things on there that are measurable. And also taking a look at really what you're flexible with. You will almost, it's going to happen almost across the board that I have to have these really hard conversations with folks about how they're going to have to take a bit of a cut and pay on what you're going to be making, even in the retail space, right? I know a lot of pharmacists are going to be making somewhere between 120 and 130 grand dollars wise here in the US after graduation. A lot of these medical information roles, medical communication roles, those are a lot of the entry level roles that you'll be wanting to target. A lot of those are not going to pay what you were making. Maybe it's going to be a contract role that you're going to take. May not be a permanent job with benefits, right? You may have to relocate yourself from, I don't know, somewhere in Iowa, no offense to anyone in Iowa, but somewhere in Iowa, maybe you relocate to Chicago, right? Where it has a higher concentration of pharma, right? But really taking a good look at what you're able to be flexible with. And in addition to that, like how okay it is, there's some ego involved with this, right? If you've been doing this job for years and years and years and years, it's very difficult to take a cut, right? But in some cases, money-wise, title-wise, direct report-wise, sometimes you have to take a little bit of a step back to take a step forward in your career. And I guarantee you it's going to be worth it in the end. So in short, are you considered entry level? Sort of, but it's more in the level in a lot of cases that you'll start with compared to your industry peers. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that definitely answers the question. So be targeted, be specific, and then then you bringing up about, taking a step back so you can move forward. And so that's personally is one of the things that I did as well as a new grad. So personally, I didn't take a pharmacist position starting off, but knowing that at the end of the day, I wanted to be able to impact a lot of people in the greatest way possible. And so I took a position as a data analyst, which wasn't a pharmacist position, but it worked out for me because I was able to move up and become a QA engineer, project manager, and then really develop my skill sets long term. So I think you make a great point that you have to think about your end goals and your end objective, and maybe working in a retail environment isn't building the skills that you're seeking to, or getting the fulfillment that you're seeking to. So sometimes you have to choose your battles and step back so you can move forward. So I think you make a great point with that. So not only is there a lot of pharmacists in the audience, there's also a lot of students in this audience as well. So how could a recent grad get a foot in industry without a fellowship?
Yes, another big question. So some of the fellowship programs that are out there, I know that I have had huge success recruiting out of them, and this goes all the way back to 2007 or so, which I'm dating myself now, but those fellowships, I don't know if you're aware of them or not, but there's a lot of great PharmD fellowships out there. However, they are hugely competitive to get into. That said, pharmacy school is hugely competitive to get into too. So, just because you don't get in or you don't necessarily want to apply, it doesn't mean that it's the end, and there still is a path for you. That path might be a little bit harder than someone that hasn't had the luck to land a fellowship. But really what it is it's going back to those same steps, right? It's working your network, right? It is joining another biggie is professional organization, right? I mean, a number of them that, I've heard really great things about, particularly for pharmacists. I know the Industry Pharmacists Association is great. I know the Medical Affairs Council is great. Information Association. I do a lot of work with Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, American Medical Writers Association, those sorts of professional associations, right? And particularly if you're in an area that's a larger city, you'll probably have a chapter locally. But you can even join as a student member. Usually there's a discount there. In many cases, if you work for an organization, a lot of cases they'll reimburse that cost for you. Usually it's a couple $100 tops. Even if they don't, I think it's a good strategy for you to be a member, to say, hey, on your resume, okay, you say you want to be a medical writer, you're a member of the American Medical Writers Association. My gosh, that's one step. You found that association. So if someone applies that has that on the resume versus they have no idea who it is, who do you think they're going to go with? I'm going to look at the person that has on their resume that at least knows what that association is. And I guarantee you the hiring managers, internal staffing, internal recruiting, they do the exact same thing. So the fact that you have done your research, the fact that you know what you want to do, right? Say you want to be a medical science liaison, which is a biggie for advanced degree folks, terminal degree folks, so PharmDs, MDs, and PhDs, right? The fact that you know what it is, you've done the legwork, maybe you've taken some classes, that's a biggie. But do more than just, say you're certified in something, or do more than, throw Drug Information Association on your resume. Look at some of the past presentations of DIA. Look at some of those students that are presenting, right? Look at some of maybe even the retail pharmacists that are presenting, right? I mean, it's really going above and beyond. And when there are local meetings or free webinars or whatever it might be, absolutely go join them. Shake hands, maybe not with COVID, but virtually shake hands with people, right? Send them a note. Say, thanks so much for, the presentation, really enjoyed it. Let me know if there's anything that I can do in return. So, the fact maybe you don't want to do, or you didn't land a fellowship, it is not the end all be all. There's still a path. You just might have to dig in a little bit more.
Yeah, a lot of good points. Especially, I like your example about if you I had at a conference or I had some type of speaking engagement, then maybe just follow with the person that spoke and just be like, "Hey, you had a great presentation. Love to just chat with you for 15 minutes to pick your brain about industry and kind of trying to break into the field." And so that's like an immediately establishing a connection over there, and that's something I really don't see. And so, and then another point that I thought about, especially when we're talking about new grads, I just was thinking about one student that just recently graduated and is going to be working as a medical science liaison without without a fellowship, and just immediately jumping into the workforce. So it can be done. It can happen. It's definitely, you would have to put in the work in order to certainly do that, and try to get experiences through joining organizations, by going out there, shaking hands with others, meeting others as well. And so there's a lot of things that you're able to do. And so instead of, just sitting and just hoping that an application is just going to filter through, you have to take action and go out and try to get those experiences, and take life by the horns, and just be able to navigate it as best to your ability. So that's a great answer to your to the question, Lindsay. So thank you for that. And so I wanted to jump into my next topic, and it's one of my favorite topics too. It's about social media and LinkedIn. So my question for you is, how can I better market my LinkedIn profile to make a good impression on future employers?
Yep. So another biggie, right? And part of the title again of this webinar. I think the first thing that you really need to do is sit down, revise your resume based on this webinar or based off other tips that you might have heard, and then merely mirror image LinkedIn to what your resume looks like. And what a lot of people may not know is a lot of recruiters that do what I do we look at job application search? Sure. We look at our email or the actual messages we get through LinkedIn? Sure. Are we going to look at your resume there? Yes. However, there are a lot of us that are able to Boolean search. I'm not sure if folks on the call will know what a Boolean is or not, but we're able to Boolean search on the back end on LinkedIn. And we're able to look on there and check, okay, who's open for opportunities? Who has this in their title? Who has this in the body of their resume, right? So I might do a search and say, all right, I'm looking for someone within the vaccine space, right, for infectious disease. So I'll search vaccine and infectious disease and PharmD and Denver, Colorado, right? And if you have all four of those things in your resume, regardless if, or your LinkedIn, regardless if you are looking for a job or not, I'm going to pull you up. And so that's how we approach you, whether you're looking for a job or not. Boolean terminology is the same way ATSs work, applicant tracking systems. It's the same way just in general resume, Boolean search. You can even Boolean on Google, and you can pull up all kinds of information on people by just simply using a Boolean search. And so really how to best position yourself, making sure that that's a mirror image. And really, if you're on the webinar this evening, make this your homework for this week. Make this your homework for the next weekend. Sit down, take an hour or two and update this, right? Not only mirror image yourself, but in addition to that, if I am looking for someone in Denver with infectious disease, I'll also look at the companies you're following. Maybe you're following my client, right? The fact that you're interested in infectious disease, if you're telling me that on your LinkedIn profile or in your resume, you better be following like the top 5 or 10 infectious disease companies in the US, right? You have to know who your audience is. You have to have done your research. I might look at some of the groups you follow, right? Maybe you're, I don't know, you're doing some sort of infusion pharmacy, right? And so I'll look to see if you're following those groups, whether you participate or not. One of the other biggies that a lot of people miss is make sure you have folks that have recommended you on LinkedIn. If you take a look at my profile, I think folks I have good relationships with, I'll ask them for a recommendation. Sometimes I'll get them without it. But on the flip side, I also recommend them, right? If, David and I worked hard on this webinar, we work together now, we're colleagues, we don't work for the same company, but I know his work style because we partnered in these last couple of months on this, right? So certainly ask for recommendations, maybe of your, past colleagues, of your peers, and then do the same in return for them, right? It's a give to get relationship. It's very symbiotic, right? So make sure that you're doing that, and without giving references on a resume, you've now given a reference, and it's, it's everybody, they call it Everclear or whatever they are. They're on the internet forever after that, right? Unless someone takes it down, and you don't have to ask for one again. That's a biggie. And then also commenting and liking relevant things. There's a lot of people that, they're weary of social media, certainly LinkedIn, although it's not a, Facebook or Twitter, Instagram or whatever, it's still a form of social media. You don't necessarily have to be active, but I highly recommend that you comment and like relevant posts. And so in terms of branding, that really is, be focused, be passionate, and, put your best self forward.
Oh, that would be a great quote if anyone wants to take that. And by the way, Lindsey, you're going to get a stellar recommendation after this.
Oh, well, I hope so.
But yeah, thank you for answering that. I did have a question in terms of, how do you go about networking if you've never met that person before? So a lot with, connecting with people on LinkedIn, like how do you exactly do that? And then also, especially towards recruiters as well, how do you establish those connections and relationships?
Sure. So the first thing that I'm going to put out there is it's not easy, right? It's uncomfortable. It really is. Not everyone is extroverted. There are a lot of people that are introverted, right? It's, and even when you are extroverted, I was on a webinar recently in the last couple of weeks and saying, hey, even though I'm a recruiter for a living and I'm extroverted, if I don't know someone in the room, I'm a little bit weary of approaching them as well, right? It's, but again, it goes back to the doing your research. I get approached all the time by people. I post things constantly, whether it's about articles that are, whether they're our clients or not. Sometimes it's inspirational messages. Sometimes it's actual jobs. But the way to really approach it is put together a well-crafted message, right? It honestly is not just sitting there and commenting on someone's post and saying interested. What in the world, like, where is that going to get you, to be very honest? Is, okay, great, you're interested. Well, am I interested in the job? Sure. Isn't anyone interested to learn more, right? So you need to take it one step beyond that, right? A lot of times the messages I get, people have done their research. They've looked at my background. They see that, I've lived in both, Asia and Europe as a military grad, right? And so they put that forward and say, hey, we have that connection in common. I just saw your post about ABCD, would love a couple of minutes of your time. So the fact that they did that extra step, I'm more apt to get back to them. And your hiring managers are going to do the same thing. So really look for that thing in common, whatever it might be, right? Maybe you're passionate about COVID, right? Maybe you want to get involved in vaccines, right? Maybe, your, family member had HPV, right? You want to get involved with that. right? You say, hey, I had a family member that was impacted by HPV. I love the mission of your company. You know, I'm passionate about entering the field. Any chance you would have a couple of minutes anytime this week or next week in order to connect? If not, I understand. And perhaps we can stay in touch for the future, right? And so it's really going back to that point of we're all human, right? It's more than just a robot on the other side of the screen. And so finding a way to connect with someone and certainly humanizing the process.
Yeah, I like that as well. So definitely making a custom curated message and really connecting with someone on, as opposed to just copy pasting a message like, how do I get into industry? Tell me about X, Y, and Z. So making it more specific towards that person that you're speaking with, just so, you know, doing your homework, researching about them, just so you're able to make that human connection. So like, that's an amazing way to, you know, open up a conversation professionally. So there's also some mistakes that some candidates make unknowingly, especially when they utilize LinkedIn. So say, for instance, try to reach out to a recruiter or try to reach out to a hiring manager. So what are some mistakes that people might run into that they should avoid if they're looking to increase their chances of getting hired?
Absolutely. And I would say some of the things that we've already talked about, right? If, you know, you're approaching someone, make sure that person is the right person or at least in the ballpark of the right person, right? I mean, I get approached all the time about things that, you know, whatever it might be, I don't know, is stack developer IT hub. I don't even know what that is, right? But I know I've heard it before, but people approach me, I'm like, I don't recruit that. And it's very clear on my LinkedIn, I don't recruit that. So I can tell the person didn't do their research. And so that's really what it is. Do the research, right? Expressing gratitude. Hey, you know, and if you're, my guess is if you're someone like relatively entry level, and then someone has an advanced degree, whoever it is that you're approaching, I might say, hi, Dr. Vu, or good evening, Dr. Vu, right? Instead of approaching them as just out of a form of respect, they'll probably say, oh, no, call me David, no problem, right? But you want to always lead off in the right foot. So really, you know, humanizing the process, expressing gratitude. Thanks so much for taking the time to read this message, right? You know, I see that you may be a hiring manager for ABC role. I'm not sure, but I thought that it might make sense to try and reach out to you. If not, I understand, but I appreciate the time that you spent to read this message, right? And in addition to that, really proofreading. One of the biggest errors I see are people that use spell check, or you can tell that people did not do their QC work, right? One of the most common misspellings that you see in the industry that I recruit in is the word, or the words, clinical trial, because people put clinical trail and trial are, you know, it's just the misuse of the word, right? So spell check is not going to catch that, right? But, you know, the fact that you spent that extra time to go over it is hugely helpful, right? The fact that, you know, when you reach out, you actually spell the company name that you're reaching out to, you spell it correctly. I see a lot of people, even in their thank you letters, they completely spell the name of their company incorrectly that they're applying to. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? And so I'm not saying that people expect you to be perfect, right? Nobody is. But if you can take that extra 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, do it. It's going to be well worth your time. But those are really some of the things I would tell you that, you know, folks stumble on: not doing their research, not proofreading. and really asking for too much time up front, right? When someone asks me for 30 minutes of my time up front, I don't know them and they're not even close to a fit for what I'm working on. Maybe it's selfish of me, but honestly, my time is valuable, their time is valuable, everybody's time is valuable. So make sure you have that value proposition. So that's what I would have to mention on that topic.
Yeah. So definitely proofread what you send, and try to make it as personal as much as possible, and hopefully everything's accurate over there. And so we have 17 minutes left on this webinar, and so I would like to transition over to some of the questions that we've been getting from the Q&A portion with the amount of time that we have, and then the last 5 minutes we'll kind of wrap everything up. So one of the questions that I did get for both of us, Lindsey, is one question that I have is, what are some of the best strategies for cold messaging fellows or other folks within industry if you don't already know them? And just before you answer, Lindsey, everyone on this webinar, if you have any more questions, feel free to send them over in the Q&A, and then I'll look through them and see if we can try to address it with the time that we have. So Lindsey, would you like to try to answer that question?
So you said cold messaging fellows, or who are they trying to message?
Yeah, cold messaging fellows, fellows for industry. So recent graduates probably that got a fellowship and.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think that most people are pretty apt to reply to you, right? At the end of the day, nobody's job is easy. I mean, I know a number of these fellows, current fellows, past fellows, people I've helped, and they're very receptive to you. I think it goes along to kind of what we were talking about already, making that personal connection. Just say, hey, Sally, or, hi, Dr. Smith. I see that you graduated a couple of years ago. You were able to land a fellowship at ABC Company. I know your time is super valuable. I'm looking to, apply to a fellowship this next year, and would love it if you had a couple of minutes to discuss, any tips that you had that make your journey successful. I think it's in a similar way, right? Because everyone got help along the way, and really make a targeted, direct message. If you see, there's hundreds of fellows out there, maybe take your extra time if you want an oncology fellowship, right? If you want a medical affairs fellowship, whatever it is that you want, try and focus on those specific people and make it even more targeted than you originally thought. One of the things that I did, I wouldn't say last year or the year before, I follow a lot of different social medias. Instagram is one of them. And so I was following, I think it was IPHO or something like that. And I saw one of the fellows that was highlighted. She works directly in my skill set. So I messaged her on LinkedIn and I said, hi, Susie Q, I just saw you, you highlight on Instagram, you have a great background. I do a lot of work in your space. Would love to add you to my network for the future. She replied to me within, 15 minutes or something like that. But it's because I made that personal connection. So hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, definitely helpful. I'm subscribed to IPHO as well. And so that's a great advice. So see if they had a member spotlight, and then just go out to reach out to them to see, their experiences, preferably trying to set up a phone call, and just kind of engage and just be, transparent. Like, hey, you're really interested in a fellowship in industry. If you have some time, so if you're able to speak with me, I'd love to hear about your experiences. And so that's a great way to find some people that are fellows and that you recognize their worth, that you recognize your contributions to industry and IPHO as well. So I think that's a great idea to definitely reach out. I did want to bring up one thing, and I'll share my screen real quick. So Lindsay did a fantastic job. And Lindsay, are you able to see that all right?
I can.
So Lindsay went above and beyond for this webinar and created a career resource list for everyone on this webinar, but also everyone on LinkedIn as well. And so I'll send this off. This is about 8 pages of great material, by the way. I'll send it off to on my LinkedIn, and you guys are able to easily download it later this week. So it kind of breaks down exactly how to make your CV, how to do your resume, and also message other folks on LinkedIn as well. And so she definitely has a lot of material in this resource list that you guys are able to utilize for yourself as you're either looking for a new job, or if you just want to improve your resume. So this is definitely great to have, especially from Lindsay, who's a director of pharmaceutical consulting and has so much experience in the recruitment field. So this is gold. And so hopefully you guys would find this of value. And like I mentioned, I'll send this off later, a little bit later in the week. So just make sure to follow myself and follow Lindsay as well. So that's one. So that answers that question. So I had another question about, so for pharmacy students that are interested in non-traditional roles, what networking strategies could you utilize to help find a position if you don't want to go down the residency path?
I mean, I think that this is also, I think just realizing what the different career paths are, right? Knowing whatever it might be, right? I know that David, you're in kind of a different area than what it is that I recruit, right? You know, industry is certainly different than the retail space, right? There's lots of different paths that you can go down. And so, you know, really my experience, certainly I can offer general career advice on how to look for a job and things like that. My real expertise is the pharma and biotech space. And so I think it's really all about doing your research, sitting on webinars like this, right? And, you know, one of the other things I do want to mention is, right, sitting on, although this webinar is free, there's a lot of webinars, there's a lot of resources that you have to pay for. If you want to invest in some of that stuff, yeah, sure, from time to time if you think it's of value to you. But there's a lot out there in Google that you'll be able to find. And I know on the career resource list, by the way, I was part of a webinar a couple of years ago that's going to be on that, and it's one of those ever links that you can see that presentation as well. And it's more than just me. There's a couple of people from a variety of different skill sets that you can learn about their career path. So really the resources, do your research, right? Look at the different resources that are out there. You know, ask for advice, maybe do some informative interviews. Even if you have to make personal, you know, connect with people on LinkedIn, say, hey, you know, Susie Q, I see that you're in this space. I'm thinking about taking my career in that direction. Looks like we had a career early in your career that was similar. Any chance you'd be willing to sit down with me to discuss? It would only take a couple of minutes of your time. But David, since you might be able to comment on that as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it made me think about when I was a pharmacy student. And one of the things that I did was kind of reach out to people that had positions that I wanted to go into without a residency. And so when I was a third-year pharmacy student or fourth-year pharmacy student, both of those, I was looking on LinkedIn to try to find people that were in informatics that recently graduated, probably in like 2006, around that time, just so I could, because it made me think about like, how did they exactly get into those positions? So just immediately off the bat, that's very interesting. That is a very non-traditional way to get into it. And so I reach out to them. I was truly interested in terms of how they got to where they're at right now, and what are some skill sets that I could either reverse engineer, or organizations or job experiences that I could do to try to put myself at a position that is going to work out best for me at the very end. So I remember reaching out to one of my colleagues, and I would say my friend right now, because he graduated in about 2016, pharmacy informaticist, didn't have a residency. How did he exactly do that? And one of his takeaways was he worked with a lot with big data and be able to manipulate a lot of data. And so that was one of his core strengths. And so what did I do? I made that one of my core strengths as well. And so going into the job market with this heavy skill set to be able to manipulate and work with large sets of data to provide meaningful uses out of it, really allowed me to make myself marketable as a potential candidate into jobs such as data analyst position. Even I was offered a hybrid staff pharmacist and informaticist position as well. So those are that. So if I didn't reach out to him, I wouldn't know how to do that. And I was honestly genuinely interested in terms of him getting to that position. And I still keep in touch with him to this day. And I thank him, like, it's been 3 years or so, and that, he helped me so much when I was a student. And so that's good advice to get. But also just think that, it's okay if people don't respond back to you. Like, it's not the end of the world. What do you do next? Just see if you're able to find someone else. See if you're able to chat with them for a little bit. And so just be humble. Remember, a lot of people's times are very precious, and everyone is extremely busy. So just be okay if they don't respond to you, and just, what's the worst that could happen? They just don't respond. So that's okay. So we have 6 minutes left on the webinar. I just kind of wanted to wrap up this webinar real quick. So thank you for everyone that contributed to this Q&A. We definitely didn't have time to answer every single one of these questions. So hopefully, if you guys are interested in more, this is our first webinar. So if you guys are interested in more, just let us know. I'll send you a feedback form if you want to fill it out to see if this was really interesting, if it was helpful for you, if you'd like to learn more. We kind of tackled a lot of topics all within 1 hour. And I could personally go hours and hours about social media and LinkedIn. So there's a lot more there. But if you guys are looking for something that's very targeted, just let us know. So if we have that good all these good responses, then we're happy to look into creating another webinar for everyone. So the last thing I wanted to kind of go over is I get asked a lot is, how do I increase my digital presence online? So you might see me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content. I might show up in your feed a little too much, but I guess it's okay. But it's actually really quite easy, and it's just really to get started. And for someone like myself, I imagine if you had to characterize myself, I'm very introverted, extremely introverted. And you might not tell based on this webinar, but I am. I could guarantee that everyone could do the same thing that I'm doing, really. So when it comes to increasing your digital presence, there's a lot of hesitation that comes along when it comes to social media, especially in pharmacy, because we like to keep a level of professionalism, especially, pharmacy is a small world. But you're able to be professional and provide value to others through social media. It's really how you paint your message and your story. And another hesitation that I see is it has to be perfect. My social media post has to be perfect each time. It might be perfect when you message a hiring manager, but the content itself, when you post on LinkedIn, it doesn't have to be perfect every time. So perfectionism is definitely the enemy of action, of getting things done. So don't really let that stop you from sharing your voice. And then another hesitation I hear about is, I don't have anything of value. So everyone has their own story. And at one point of time, you were probably a pre-pharm student, and you looked up to a pharmacy student. As a pharmacy student, you looked up to other pharmacists. As a pharmacist, you're inspired by other pharmacists, but many other professionals as well. And everyone has their own unique story in terms of how they got into that point. So it's being a pharmacist at the end of the day, you had to go through trials, tribulations, work hard to get to where you're at. So, share that story. Everyone has their own unique career path in terms of where they got to that point. So at the beginning of this webinar, I asked everyone to remember 1 to 2 takeaways that you learned from this session. And so I'm going to give everyone an action item, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. And so I'm going to give you an action item, which is first, set up a LinkedIn if you haven't already. Second, make a post about this webinar and what you got out of it, your takeaways to help out those who weren't able to attend. Then tag me, tag Lindsey, and tag the Academy. And then hashtag catching fire, because that's exactly what we're trying to do, is we want to spark passion. We want to spark fire into yourselves. And I want to instill passion to other people to seek what they want out of life and lead fulfilling careers. And so hopefully this action item you're able to take the first step into establishing a digital presence if you haven't already. So I kind of laid it out for everyone. And the last few things is, Lindsey created an amazing career resource list, and I'll be posting that later on my LinkedIn later in this week, so you guys are able to download it, and Lindsey as well. So make sure to follow her, and she'll be posting there as well. And then lastly, I'll be sending out a form for those that attended. And if you have any feedback of what you like, what you didn't like, and more targeted things that we could address. And lastly, if you'd like your resume to be on file for Lindsey's company, then there'll be a link in that form as well. Totally optional, but if you want to send your resume and upload it there, you guys are happy to. So thank you all for joining this webinar, and I appreciate everyone's time to spend some time with myself and Lindsey. And so until next time, thank you, everyone.